Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you chose to spend some time here. If you're a regular podcast listener, then I'm sure you know leaving a rating and review for a show on the platform where you listen helps other people find that show. That's one of the reasons that I'm so excited when someone reviews Girls Talking Life. The other reason is the encouragement that it gives me. Knowing that you're benefiting from what you're hearing here gives me the boost I need to keep doing this work, even when it's hard. Here's what one listener had to say about the show. More important now than ever. In a time where it can be hard to connect with others, Johanna's gift for building community through stories is more important than it ever has been. And while in real life community is always so important, this podcast is a great substitution in a time where in real life community is hard to impossible to come by. Amanda, thank you. Thank you so much for taking a minute to share your thoughts. It means a lot. If you haven't left a review yet, please consider it. If not for this show, then for another show that you love. I guarantee they will be grateful you did. I am putting together an experience called The Gathering Project, where I'll walk a group of women through planning, prepping, and executing their gatherings. It can be a one-time thing, a virtual thing, or an ongoing thing, like a weekly Bible study. But I want to help you get back to gathering after being isolated for much of last year, and I want to support you. If you're someone who is intimidated by the thought of inviting or hosting, you're welcome to join. If you are an avid hoster, but you just want to make it meaningful for your guests by thoughtfully defining what you'd like them to experience, you're invited too. It'll be a 5-day project with videos, a workbook, and a Facebook group to share ideas and get support. Stay tuned for more information on the Gathering Project in the coming weeks. Today, we're continuing our series on cultivating community, creating meaningful connections, and building lasting friendships. I am chatting with Brandy Wallner, founder of A Good Conversation Dinner, a table ministry designed to help women connect across all perceived boundaries and as fellow image bearers of God. We talk about what good conversation looks like, how you can create a safe space for vulnerability, and what it means to really connect. Let's jump in. Here is my conversation with Brandy. Hey there, Brandy. Thank you so much for coming on Girls Talking Life.
Hi, Johanna. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tell me just a little bit about who you are, where you live, and who the people in your life are.
Yeah, so my name is Brandy, and I'm a freelance writer. I live in Southern California with my husband, and we are about 20 minutes outside of LA, very far south, and if I stand on my tiptoes on my balcony, I can see the port of Los Angeles with ships coming in with cargo. And so it's a pretty cool place to live, and we love it. And so some of my projects that I work on as a freelance writer, I get to do some content writing for Hope Writers. I'm the community writer there, and a lot of your listeners might be familiar with Hope Writers, and do a few other projects on the side for some nonprofit organizations. And yeah, so that's kind of how I spend my day.
Before we hit record, we were talking about the weather difference between Columbus, Ohio and Southern California. What is your day like there today? Your temperatures?
Oh my goodness. So it is probably, let's say right now, I'd say it's probably about 67 outside, and it is sunny. It's there's a little bit of a crisp in the air, but it is sunny and delightful. I'm sorry.
I am living vicariously through you because it's about 28 degrees here. There was a little sunshine, but
oh man, yeah,
nothing like spring.
Gosh, it's so beautiful looking at the snow, but I always think I don't know if I'm definitely a warm weather girl, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, like you mentioned, you are a writer, but you also have this other project. You call it your passion project and also a table ministry. Tell me what that is all about.
Yeah, so it's called A Good Conversation Dinner, and it is a table ministry, like you mentioned. It kind of came about Gosh, well, I really think it's been coming about for probably years and years before I knew it was coming about. But back in 2017, I had left a few months prior. I left my job in 2016, a full-time job that I had had for my whole adult life. And I really was searching for kind of, where God wanted me to be. And one of the things that I was doing is I was spending a lot of time doing some social media work for a friend of mine. She had a small business that she needed, social media updates and things like that. And so I found myself at home on the internet quite a bit, on Instagram all the time. And I would hear people talking about certain podcasts. And so this is back when, before I was the podcast junkie that I am now. And I started listening to podcasts, and some of the early people that I listened to were, these were female hosted podcasts for the most part. And I really admired the questions that they were asking their guests. I started thinking about, gosh, why don't I have these like very, deep conversations, meaningful conversations with my friends? And I was feeling just envious of that level of connection. And one morning I woke up with, kid you not, about 40 questions on my mind of things that I wanted to ask the women in my life and things that I thought would be helpful to connect with women who I didn't know very well. So I sat down, I took out my laptop, I was in bed on a Saturday morning, and I just let it rip. Like I had, about 40 questions in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
And they just kept coming. And then I didn't really do anything with it for a while. I just kind of sat on it and was like, okay, well, I think I'm supposed to do something with these, but I don't know what. And over time, what became clear was, this would be awesome to do with some women around a table over a good meal. So many of my friends were in those early stages of having little ones. And anytime that we did get together, it was like, you can't finish your sentences, right?
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about like, what if we just created a night that was specific to conversation? Like that is the entire goal, is connection around these questions. And so I decided that I would do some thinking about how to create the best environment for that to happen, for people to feel like that they were okay to be vulnerable. And I had a couple of dinners at my house and just kind of tried it out. And I had a really great response, and just, people were very open, and I wasn't sure that they would be, but they were. And I just thought to myself, well, I also think this might be a good opportunity to have women come over who I don't know very well, and a kind of a quicker way to get past some of the small talk and get to some of the deeper, richer conversation. Yeah. So it just sort of evolved. And, I had friends who thought, no, these are really great questions. Like I would love to be able to do this too. So that's how sort of the cards were born, but that took another couple of years to happen.
Okay. Well, I can so relate to what you're saying about listening to podcasts and admiring the conversations that were happening on them and wanting that in your own life. And that kind of fed into my starting my own podcast. So I can completely relate to that.
Yes.
And what you're saying about kind of moving past that small talk. I have cards too, as we talked about, Girls Talking Life conversation cards. And they were something that I made long before the podcast, long before I ever thought really about what I was doing. I was just having a girls' night, and I wanted to spark some conversation that was different than just the normal, this is how my week's going. This is what my kids are up to. And my conversation cards that I made at that time, I would say they weren't even to spark deep conversation. It was just to get people talking about something different, something that, I don't know about this person. These are my good friends, but have we ever talked about this specific topic? So I love your conversation cards and the idea for the dinner.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we both have a love for eliciting conversation, right? I've seen some of your questions too. And I think that mine are digital. It's a digital product. So if, someone goes to purchase them, they do have to take them to a copy shop. And I do recommend having a professional print them out, because unless you have an amazing printer at home, you want them to be able to be used, multiple times. So cardstock, that's what I always recommend. And yeah, I think as I thought through some of the questions, and I'm always adding new ones, my goal is always to help people connect better with each other, with themselves, but also one of the things that has been a driving force behind continuing this during times when I felt like, I don't know if this is, worth the time and effort I'm putting into it. Maybe I should just keep them for myself. I do believe that because we're all made in God's image, there is a connecting thread between us all, meaning we might not have the same exact lifestyle. We may not look the same. We may not be in the same life stage, but underneath it all, we all desire the same things out of life. And I think that when I think through these questions, what I'm really trying to do is get to like the why behind your answer. And the why is often what connects us across any perceived boundaries.
Yeah.
And so I think especially during this time in the world, it's been important for me to continue with this project because it just seems like something we all need so badly.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
You talk about creating a safe to be vulnerable environment. That sounds great, but how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think as a host, you have to be willing to go first. I think that, a lot of times all it takes is one person to open up for everyone else in the room to feel that safety. And that's a hard thing, but it's also something that I think is it's practicable in the sense of because I've written the questions, right? And because I've hosted a few times now, I'm now in a place where I'm used to having to answer. And so I think if you go first as a host, that creates that space. I also think there are things that we can do in terms of listening, right? If we can work on the listening aspect too, that's really important. So, as someone who likes to connect with people, if someone says something that resonates with me, I am the first one to say, to kind of interrupt with oh my gosh, yeah, me too, and that is good. But also I think sometimes if someone is sharing something really vulnerable, it can either sidetrack the conversation, right? So someone can stop and respond to you, and that might make the conversation go in a different direction. Or it can just sort of, if there was something that person was leading to that maybe isn't the direction that you think it was going, that can sometimes stop them as well. So I think listening without interruption, and that's actually a big, the cards come with, we actually have placemats that I have written sort of guidelines for a good conversation are printed on the placemats. And so one of the top guidelines is listening without interruption. So it's a good practice for me and for all the other guests, I think. And another thing too, and I always say like these conversations can happen, over pizza. It doesn't have to be fancy. But I do think there is something to be said about food and being in a home or, in this case, Zoom, but in the good old days when we could be in homes,
right.
I think there is something about the smell of something cooking, candles being lit, creating like a warm environment, I think helps people open up too. So whether that means, if you are going to do takeout, like putting on some music, making your lighting a little bit lower, all of those things that feel just warm and inviting. We don't think necessarily that those things matter, but I think that when we create like a warm environment, it helps people, just feel at home and feel like they can open up. So that's something else that I talk about quite a bit, but it's it's interesting as I've heard people use the cards during this season of COVID. I had a friend reach out to me recently and say, "Oh, I used your cards over my family Zoom." And this woman has a huge family. She does like a 17-person Zoom, like regularly occurring, let's get together and chat about, like, get together and talk about our lives via Zoom. So
Oh
her
my.
big family.
Wow.
She used the cards and she said it was a hit with, 17 people via Zoom. So they didn't have the elements of food or music or candlelight or any of those environment setting things. But I think just the idea of the intentional questions help them connect. And Zoom is hard to feel like you're connecting with someone, right?
It
So
is.
yeah, so I think it was useful and I'm really happy to hear that.
That's great. And like you said, we aren't really doing this right now, but just the act of inviting someone into your home creates a different level of vulnerability, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right on. When we extend that invitation, I think that means more than we think sometimes, Absolutely.
You mentioned listening, and I am getting ready actually to take a class next week on active listening. How do we actively listen, and how do we become better listeners?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think so many of us, there's a reason there's a class, right? we all struggle. So I think in terms of these dinners, one of the things that helps is that we're all answering the same question. So the way that it's set up is that, everyone's going to get their turn. So I think knowing that everyone at the table is going to get an opportunity to share their story, it almost takes some of that, you're thinking it through, like, because you become really interested in how someone else is going to answer the same question. And so in that context, I think that knowing that the question is the same, you'll get an opportunity, but also the idea around that table is to connect with other people and to figure out, and when we host, we talk about sort of setting the scene when people come in, letting them know that the vision behind the dinner is not just to eat a good meal, but it's to connect with one another. And so it's really listening for, what are our commonalities and what are the ways in which we're completely different. But, there's, again, just coming back to that why. One of the things that we do is that we say, you get a follow-up question, but you only get to have 2 follow-up questions during the evening. So the idea too is to write those things down and come back to them at the end. So that way you remain an active listener because you're not just like waiting for a good moment to like butt in, because you don't get to. You have to write it down. And then ask at the end. So I think those things sort of help the active listening process.
Okay. There are a lot of distractions that pull us away from active listening, I feel like. Do you have some guidelines around maybe bringing phones into the dinner?
Oh, yeah. No phones. No phones. You can have your phone with you, but no phones, like no phones on the table. So if we're around the table, the only thing on that table are the cards and your dinner plate. That's it.
Very nice.
Yes, yes.
All right, Brandy, I am an introvert. You, I know, are also an introvert. How does that change how you gather? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so anytime that I talk to another introvert, one of the things that feels like is common to us is that small talk is hard. We have difficulty just sort of like, showing up at an event and talking about things that, are weather, et cetera. All those things are tough for us. And we'd almost rather just like not talk at all.
Yeah, that's true.
If that is our option. So with this, I think because the questions are designed to get a little deeper, it's less draining. It's actually, for me, it's life-giving to hear people's real, rich answers to things. And I find that I can stay tuned in much longer than if I were at a party with, a bunch of people we're all just kind of talking about our days. And that's not to say, like, in the card sets, I do have questions that are lighter also. Like, I have some fun questions that are just like, what's your favorite movie? But even within that, it's really interesting to get at that, like, well, why is that your favorite movie? Right. And that's the thing that really sort of connects us also.
You were talking about how the questions and the prompts are so helpful. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we need something to just take us a little deeper?
Yeah, I think that we all live such busy lives. We stay very surface, I think, most of the day because we're all sort of just in this like survival mode a lot of the time, like get the things done. And I'm an Enneagram 1. Like, I like to check boxes. I like to cross things off. But if I'm not careful, that's where I can sort of like live. And I think that it really takes me stopping and asking myself really intentional questions to even understand my own thoughts and my own ways that I'm processing or why I'm suddenly upset about something. And it's like, well, what have you been thinking about for the past hour or whatever, I think that we all need those intentional moments to connect with what we actually think about things and, what our friends feel about something or, getting to know someone at the table who we don't know very well, our neighbor or that woman at church who I've been wanting to get to know, but I haven't really had an opportunity to have a conversation with her. Those are those things, those questions really help us to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even like you said, when you do know someone, it just gives you a peek even deeper onto maybe how they are or why they are the way they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What would you say to a woman who is apprehensive about hosting?
Yeah, I think I would ask her first what the apprehension is. I've had some people say, well, you like to cook, Brandy, like you like to host, you like to make a meal. And that's all true. But I don't ever want that to be a reason why that we miss out on connecting with each other. So I always go back to, order food or have everyone bring something, potluck. That's actually a really great way to connect also, right? Because inevitably someone is bringing like their favorite recipe that they make all the time. And you can ask questions even starting there, right? So that's one reason that someone might be apprehensive. Another reason that someone might be apprehensive is just that they are more introverted. And I would quickly say, like, I get it, but because those questions are going to elicit richer conversation, you would be amazed at how much less draining that process is of being around people. And then I guess another apprehension might be just time. And I think that, we all have busy schedules and this is something that, I don't do like when we were doing it, I was doing it like not even every month. I was hosting something every other month because I do like to really think through who am I going to invite and give people time to say which Saturday they have open. I try and choose like a Saturday evening and then, give people enough time to find a sitter and all of those things. So yeah, I think all of those objections are, overcomable if your desire is really to not only connect, but also be a part of the solution of people feeling like there are these barriers between us. And I think that this is a really great way to start to pull some of those down.
Now, when you do your hosting, is it a mixed group? Is your husband involved?
So not yet. So far, it has been a purely female experience,
Okay.
But I have definitely thought about having even like a couples version because I think a lot of these questions would make for a really great like date night conversation. I keep kind of hinting at it to my husband. Like, I think this is what we should do on our next date night. So I'm gonna have to pilot it first and then get back to you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just wondering.
Yeah.
I feel like the conversation is definitely different if it's a mixed group versus all women, but not a bad thing, just different. Would you say that there is a key ingredient or ingredients to making a really successful dinner?
Oh, so one of the things that I think is really important is to like talking about guests and your guest list. I like to have a smaller number of people. So typically, and I guess it could be however many your dining room table can handle. But I typically do 5 people. So plus myself is 6.
Okay.
And I like there to be a mix of life stage. So, I want someone at that table that is married. I want someone at that table who's single. I want someone at that table who is older than me, who has, children that have moved out of the house. I want someone at that table who is, of a potentially varying faith. So I am a Christian, but I want someone at that table who maybe doesn't know the Lord or someone who believes something different than I do. And so I really look at like, who am I inviting here? Who's at the table? I think it's important if you live in an area that has an ethnically diverse population, I like to think about that too. I think that it's really important to learn from each other.
Oh, I love the thoughtfulness behind that.
Yeah, I think that again just goes to the vision behind a good conversation dinner. Yeah.
Well, Brandy, I am going to move on to ask for your favorite 5. This is something I ask all my guests. It just gives us a little peek into who you are a little bit more. What are 5 things that you are reading or using or watching right now that are your favorites?
Okay. So when you first asked me this, for some reason, all my mind could go to really was food. So I must have been just hungry, Johanna. But so my first thing are these little sweet treats from Trader Joe's. They are the dark chocolate pistachio toffee squares.
Oh, I was at Trader Joe's today, but I have never had those.
Oh, they're in. So you know how they put like some of their sweets on top of the freezer section, just sort of on that shelf right above?
Yes.
That's where you will find those, Johanna.
Okay. Well, next week, Brandy.
Perfect. You'll have to let me know what you think. My second one. So I have very curly hair, and I'm always looking for a new product because curly hair tends to be very dry. And so I just found a new leave-in conditioner that I love, and the brand is called Novex. It's Novex Collagen Infusion Leave-in Conditioner.
Okay.
It is my go-to right now in these like drier days of winter too. Thumbs up on that.
My daughter has naturally curly hair, so we're always looking for that leave-in conditioner too.
There you go. Yeah, it has been a game changer. A great cup of coffee, Johanna. I'm simple. I drink it black every morning. That is what I'm looking forward to. So,
yes, ma'am.
So I would say a guilty pleasure is any episode of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. That is one of my favorite things on a Monday night. And my 5th is I love Maverick City Worship. They are a worship band that I could just listen to endlessly and typically have them on repeat in my house.
Brandy, I have loved diving into what a good conversation dinner is all about. I love the thoughtfulness and the intentionality that goes into it. And tell me, if someone was wanting to host something like this, how would they get in touch with you? How would they find everything they need?
Yeah, so everything you need is over at my website, and that is brandywallner.com/AGCD. You can find all of the products there. So I have a couple of different card sets. I have those placemats that I mentioned. And then also you can just read a history and a couple of different testimonials of how people have felt at those dinners. And right now I actually am going to be offering your listeners, Johanna, a 30% discount So as soon as this episode airs, when you're listening to it, I believe it's coming out on the 22nd, right, Johanna?
Yes.
Okay. So on the 22nd of February through March 1st, you can head over to that website and drop in the code GTL for Girls Talking Life and get 30% off any of the card sets that you see there. So the smallest card set has 5 questions up until the largest card set has the whole set plus placemats. So yeah, whatever you think would work best for you and your guests.
Okay, that is perfect. Thank you for generously giving us a code.
Yeah.
And I am this whole first quarter of 2021 encouraging meaningful connection and friendship and conversation. And this goes right along with it. So I hope that you are planning a gathering, whether it is online or just with some family members in your home where you can connect on a deeper level. So thank you for your assistance in this, Brandy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Johanna. It's been a pleasure.
It's been so nice to talk with you. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brandy. One thing she mentioned that I loved about her project was that it was in the works for a long time. Years before she started a good conversation dinner, she was being prepared for it. And then waking up with all the questions on her mind, and still it was a while before she used them. God calls us and equips us in His time. All we have to do is pay attention, notice where we're finding ourselves and what we're being drawn to, and follow His lead. It might be a slow process, but that's okay. It's different from the way the world operates. And if you're a follower of Jesus, being different from the world is a good thing. I also love Brandy's thoughtfulness on who she intentionally includes around her table. You can read her words and find out more about a good conversation dinner at brandywallner.com. And don't forget, she is giving you 30% off her card sets. Use the discount code GTL. If you have a friend who needs to hear this encouragement too, share the show with them this week. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. Thanks for tuning in.